listening to Not Good Enough, an inadequate response to inadequate responses recorded in an inadequate way this week. My name is Mitch Alexander.
I'm Tom McLean.
And
I'm Evie.
And we've got Isaac here supervising as well. And the change in sound, as you can probably hear, means that we are, as you can tell, recording this remotely now in an effort to save all of your lives.
Yeah, if you're wondering why the intros were so awkward, it's because Mitch still, I think, pointed at our icons on his screen in order to cue us in to introduce ourselves.
It's like, so
No, I was just going to say your names. I was just going to say your names and then just let everyone else figure it out otherwise. But, you know, fuck it. We're all good.
We jumped in ahead and figured it out without you, which is what a lot of people are having to do with the government in response to the coronavirus crisis. Hey.
Oh, Christ. So, I mean, yeah, it feels like we did say last week that we were going to release a canned episode, that we've got a more history-oriented episode. We are not going to do that because, as I think it was Isaac pointed out, we kind of have to talk about the news at the moment. It's a pretty big deal right now, stuff that's going on.
Yeah, it's the biggest news week in like 100 years, so...
Yeah, but that's also the weird thing, is that it's the biggest news week in 100 years, but also anything we say right now, we are recording at 2:33 p.m. on a Sunday, and I think it's worth mentioning the minute, because at 3:33 p.m. everything might change.
Yeah. Yeah, as we record right now, there's just rumours that Victoria and New South Wales are going to go into a full lockdown tonight. Or
I heard
Tuesday.
48 hours.
Tuesday, or
Yeah.
it's all rumours at the moment. So who
And that's the thing.
friggin' knows?
That's the thing as well. There's reports that, like, it's a rumoured base, essentially journalists on Twitter saying that the Victorian government might shut down without the backing of the federal government shutting down. They're just like, Dan Andrews is just gonna do it because he might not be able to get everyone on board, which is just insane to think about, because I'm not sure exactly, essentially we've got to start breaking some of this stuff down, because so much of it means nothing and everything. This is the biggest news week based entirely on speculation, but it's also the biggest news week based on stuff that has already happened.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to deal with this shit.
It's almost like the sort of state of the media and journalism in Australia has been known to be terrible for the last 10 years, and that's really coming back to just bite everyone.
And we're all struggling because, even as we were preparing for this episode, things keep happening. Even just as we were preparing notes today, the announcement about New Start being doubled just happened as we were talking about it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, let's talk about that for a second. Let's kick on with the stuff, sure. So we had this whole thing in the notes about how the government's refusing to raise Centrelink and that sort of thing, and yeah, they just announced this afternoon that they're going to double the rate of New Start, which is incredible news for anybody who's on New Start.
So that's the thing as well. There were plans through the week as well that there was essentially a two-tier system going to be set up for people who were already unemployed before coronavirus hit. You stay on the shitty New Start. You stay below subsistence and you starve during the pandemic. But then, as McLean called them, the good unemployed, the people with jobs that can't help it, they get a different payment. Now, I'm pretty sure that has just been waived. The last that I saw was that there is $550 additional per fortnight for anyone currently claiming benefits, and sole traders and small businesses from some arbitrary point in April can start to claim some stuff as well, which is good, but it's one of those things, again, where it's like, so much of what coronavirus has done has just shown that so much of the way our society was set up beforehand was total bullshit. We can't possibly be raising Centrelink to get through this. But here is all this money we're just going to throw at Centrelink.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, why? But also, but why are we doing that? Oh, it's to keep the economy afloat. Oh, so it wouldn't even ruin the economy. Oh, we're doing it so the economy could actually keep going. So what was bullshit was the surplus you kept going for. Right. Cool.
Yeah, I thought it was going to... No, it's only going to ruin the economy if there's really bad stuff happening. But once the virus is cured, you see, raising New Start will retroactively ruin the economy.
Yeah, it's fucked. It's not... It's bullshit. But I will say, I'm not giving any credit to Scott Morrison, but it is nice to think that we haven't gone full even though he mentioned in a press release today, again at 2:35, he mentioned more draconian measures might be needed to combat coronavirus. But the main thing is, like, at the very least, even someone like Scott Morrison has to admit that value is found in labour and we need to take care of people. Like, that's nice that it's just like, okay, cool. We're not going to entirely fuck people. Like, some of this has to sustain.
Oh, he's not going the Boris Johnson route, which he, like, reversed, which was, like, the whole gotta thin the herd. And, that's basically like, well, we're just going to assume that, like, you know, a certain percentage of people are going to die. But I guess it's only the elderly and the poor. And then they realised that, like, 10% of the population will die that way. And he was like, wait. Let's go back on that.
They go about this herd immunity thing, which is just a fundamental misunderstanding of the way that herd immunity works.
Yeah.
And he's just like, we'll just get herd immunity. We'll get everybody to get the virus.
That's
and then
not it.
Everybody will be immune. And they were like, Mr. Johnson, 250,000 people will die under that plan. And he's like, well, I would never make such a plan in the first place. Like, come on. I read a good post. Oh, I'm sorry, Isaac, to make you try and look this up in the show notes. But I just saw this take saying that the government should, like, not be playing politics at all in this point. The sole purpose of the government should be to implement the advice of the medical experts and fuck off for every other thing. And I think that's absolutely true.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
They shouldn't be making decisions. They should just be going, yes, sir, to the medical experts.
Can you believe, like, a week ago, Scott Morrison was still saying, hey, yeah, I'm going to go to the footy?
Absolutely,
do you know that,
I can believe that.
If there was reporting, I mean, it was only a tweet. I didn't actually see any article about it. But apparently anyone that went to that football game had to self-isolate.
Classic.
There was a confirmed case of coronavirus at the football game.
Fucking owned.
Yeah.
Pretty good. Well done.
So that was let's put that in sort of time perspective. So that was last weekend. So that was sort of circa Friday night last week. Scott Morrison was saying, yeah, look, it's basically fine. Barnaby Joyce was saying, look, snakes are a worse problem in Australia, which is insane. 3 people die a year of snake bite. But Scott Morrison was saying, yes, like, we'll talk about, like, limiting crowd gatherings and stuff, and we'll implement some controls starting Monday. But this weekend, the footy's on, the Hillsong conference is on. Go crazy, everyone. Live it up. And people did. And then Monday rolled around, they were like, all right, yeah, no, it's a serious issue when we are putting in these crowd controls. And they've just, like, ramped up these crowd controls basically every couple of days. So at the start of the week, the crowd control limit was like 500. And then as of the 16th of March, it was only 100. And then as of the 21st of March, a crowd is limited to the size of the venue, which is just you're only allowed 1 person per 4 square meters, which is basically how it was announced. And everyone was like, all right, yeah, cool. 1 person per 4 square meters. That's a really easy and intuitive sort of system to follow because everyone has an innate understanding of how big a 4 square is. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, it does seem the weird thing about all of these measures that they're putting through doesn't seem to be taking into effect that what we know is that at the very least, the vast majority of people show their symptoms like at least like about a fortnight after they come into contact with it and become properly infected. And also a lot of people with this are asymptomatic. So we are just dealing with a fortnight ago's numbers now. Whenever it busts up by 301 day, which we had recently, that's just a fortnight ago. That was always going to happen. Like, it's going to continue to ramp up for a fortnight.
A fortnight from now, we're going to see the whole of the cabinet coming down with coronavirus now because they were exposed to Peter Dutton.
So that timeline's a little bit woolly. So the incubation period can be only like 3 days, but at its biggest, it's about 14. So most people show symptoms about a week is the sort of rule of thumb. But there have been people showing symptoms of 14 days. I believe there's actually been symptoms of people showing symptoms even longer than that. Like very rare, but the sort of the rule of thumb is like within about a week for most people, but you can't be sure until it's about 14 days. And then if it's longer than that, like that, that's sort of struck by lightning chances. Like, maybe, but it's not practical to really think about it like that. And then of course, some people go the whole 14 days and it turns out they had it the whole time, but they just weren't symptomatic at all.
Yeah.
And so they just, the people who are saying like, oh, but I feel fine, so I'm not worried about it. And indeed, the people who are giving advice like, oh, certainly stay home if you feel sick. It's like, it's barely an indicator
Stop.
because one, you might already be contagious, and two, you might never show symptoms but still be contagious.
That's the big thing. Like, we're not medical experts, but we are rampant moralizers. And you are a piece of shit if you are not taking other people's health and safety seriously in this. Like,
Yeah.
there is an extremely, extremely small chance that I could die from this. Stupidly unlucky. Damn, that'd be a shame. That would be like getting bitten by a snake. Fuck. There is a much higher chance, even though it is still extremely small, that I could be hospitalized. And one, I don't want that. Two, I don't want to be a burden on the healthcare system. There's also an okay chance that I will actually get pretty sick from this. And I don't want that. So purely in my self-interest, I don't want to have pneumonia for a week or so. I don't want to feel like absolute garbage. But the other thing is, I know people that are in that very small chance of people that could fucking die from it. And I would feel mortified. I'm horrified about giving it to them. That's what I want to fucking avoid.
Yeah. It's the thing of like being that link in the chain of people that gave it to somebody that was vulnerable and then did end up dying. But even the people who are linked in that chain, like there's the report saying that like, oh, most cases of coronavirus result in mild symptoms. Mild in this sense doesn't result in a hospital visit, but that's the extent of it. Like mild, if you have like just completely bedridden, unable to walk a few steps away from your bed for 10 days, that counts as a mild case because you didn't have to go to hospital.
A failure though of communication in that way, because like if I read that and I saw mild, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll get a sniffly nose and that's it. But yeah.
Well, a sniffly nose is actually not a symptom of COVID. So
oh, thank goodness.
If you're feeling a bit sick and you've
got the last few days are purely psychosomatic. Cool. Okay.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. I just think as well, there is something to the idea of the communication around this being so poor, because what we have heard is that the vast majority of cases, like 81% at last count, are mild or asymptomatic. And that doesn't contain in it the multitudes of, you might be asymptomatic or you might be bedridden with pneumonia-like symptoms, which still count as mild. Everyone hears mild or asymptomatic and they're like, oh, well, I'll feel a bit groggy and a bit sick or I might not feel anything. So, no, this is heaps worse.
It's this quite weird thing that the media kind of does have to toe this line of, it is really important not to incite panic, right? Because otherwise we'll see worse knock-on effects than just what the disease are. Most people can survive being bedridden for a week. Like, that's a really shit disease, but compared to the fact that people are dying and healthcare systems are being overwhelmed, that, bedridden for 10 days is mild compared to death. And it is mild compared to a hospital visit. Like, I don't think it's misleading to say that that's a mild case, especially if in your head you've got this picture of like, one of the diseases from like Outbreak or the other one, Contagion, that, these horrifying, like, apocalyptic level diseases. That's not coronavirus. It's not, if you get it, it's a death sentence. And that is worth, emphasizing. It's only a death sentence for some people. It's not a death sentence for everybody.
Yeah.
But also, you should feel bad about having a death sentence for other people. Come on, guys.
Well, yeah, it's important.
Listen, Jack.
I think that's why it's difficult to talk about it, because you do have to hit both of those things equally hard. Of most people probably won't die, and society shouldn't panic, versus some people definitely will die, and society should take it really, really seriously. And our society is really not very good at taking something seriously without panicking.
Yeah.
Because, we've had so many decades of our politicians and media either hyping stuff up to its maximum extent or downplaying it as nothing. And there's really no ability for many people who are in the sort of very public platforms that we have to communicate a subtle concept.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that level of like media and leadership bullshit, the amount of stuff we've seen from like Australian media pundits and the body politic about fucking coronavirus has just been absolutely insane. We've got like Alan Jones talking about how coronavirus is fine, don't worry about it. Also Andrew Bolt pivoted within a week when he first said that, it's not actually that bad. It was like March 7th. Doesn't deserve this panic at all. March 14th. We need to lock down now to stop the spread of coronavirus. It's like, you gormless shit. You were shilling for business interests to keep that open for that time when you thought you could profit from it. And now that you know that you can't profit from it, you've pivoted into fucking trying to shut it down.
So Eddie Maguire, who's the head of the AFL steering committee for whether this season should go ahead, has been spreading the whole herd immunity bullshit on Fox News as well. So yeah, what the fuck? If he's still saying this, no one should be trusting his decisions as to whether the AFL round should be going ahead. It shouldn't, if that's the case.
Yeah, this herd immunity thing, you really, when you hear about somebody saying, oh, the way that we deal with this is by herd immunity, like that directly translates to the way that we deal with this is by letting thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people die.
Yeah.
It's not a solution. It's just setting a bomb off in a nursing home is equivalent. Like, maybe that'd solve a problem, but you don't do it and you don't talk about it like it's good.
There's the part of it as well that I've seen a lot of, like, related to that is the climate is healing itself. Mother Nature is telling us to go to our room and think about it, and the environment. We're seeing all these great things happen, and the Earth is fixing itself. And we're the virus, and it's like, no, that's just abdicating responsibility away from the corporations. This isn't a matter of like personal accountability, and then because essentially that is the same thing. In the same way we get herd immunity from this, we can't have the planet fixing itself by just telling all our immunocompromised friends and old people to just fucking die. And it's like, hey, we did it. So what the fuck is wrong with you?
It's eco-fascist shit. It's the same shit like everyone who thinks that overpopulation is the problem to the environment. It's the same thing that they're the ones who'd be sharing all that stuff like, Venice's canals are all clear now. That means we should have no people in there. What? Okay, shut up. We can still do it. It doesn't, like, less people is not the answer. But, of course, this is the kind of thing that those people say.
Yeah, it's also worth pointing out that coronavirus, as every sort of public, large-scale disaster does, directly and disproportionately impacts the vulnerable, like the poor and the elderly and the disabled. They're always going to get hit harder by these tragedies. And so when you're like, oh, this tragedy is actually good, though, look, the Earth's healing itself, you're just saying the Earth is healing itself by shedding off the poor people instead of any of the people who are actually responsible for climate change. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I was going to say like that. Well, just on what Evie said, it was a good pivot into some of the other, like, batshit stuff. With like the amount of conspiracy theories that are coming out about this as well, which are coming from respectable people in Parliament. Respectable, quote unquote. They hold positions that should be worthy of respect, but they've run the positions through the fucking mud. The main one we had was because obviously Trump has been calling it Chinese virus or Chinese flu or some shit like that, which is
that's literally a right-wing trope right now too. Like they call it the Wuhan virus or the Chinese virus.
Yeah, but we've also got not to be outdone. We've got Bronwyn Bishop calling it a Chinese bioweapon, which is pretty good. Bronwyn Bishop, the woman who took helicopters to lunches, essentially. I don't care about the facts. Fuck her. She doesn't deserve the respect of having her fact-checked. She's fucking gross, and she's calling it a Chinese bioweapon, which, to my mind, is just her grappling with the fact that the universe has decided to finally upend her privileged position and put her in a case of risk, because the virus seems to be hitting both the old people but also well-connected celebrities for some reason. But like, it spread through that pretty quick. So yeah, she's at risk. Damn.
Yeah.
Well, it's so amazing to me. Like, person. People talk a lot about like Scott Morrison's connection to the church and how he willingly told people to go to Hillsong and everything like that. I actually, my theory has always been that I think a lot of people in power and a lot of religious people just think that they're above getting sick in some weird way.
Yep.
They just think that they're morally exempt from any consequences to it. I know that sounds a bit hokey, but just especially thinking of the way that Peter Dutton blindly went along and did his cabinet meeting knowing that he was probably asymptomatic and then falling sick as well. And he just doesn't seem to care about that. He just thinks oh yeah,
you look at the sort of corruption scandals and really sort of any privileged life at all, it's a life lived without consequences. You have, if you have mates, like if you have connections in high places and that sort of thing, problems go away for you. And if you spend, 45, 50 years just having problems go away for you, that's how you start to relate to any problem of like, oh, I mean, sure, it's a problem, but problems go away. I can make them go away. And so when you're confronted with something like coronavirus where that doesn't really apply, you're just a bit lost. And that's why our current government is not equipped to handle it.
Yeah.
I think, would you guys want to talk about some of the good things that some rich people are doing through this, or just as a good news thing? Because I think there's some people like to call out. There's some.
Yeah, there's a couple.
There are some good things happening. So the one that I saw first up, which I did actually kind of like, was someone I've never heard of, Gary Neville. He co-owns 2 hotels.
That was good.
He used to be a football player. He has made his hotels available for like health services staff in the UK, and he's keeping all of his staff on as well. They don't have to come to work, but he's keeping them paid, which is an example of someone very high up taking the hit. Presumably, it's going to hit him at least alongside everyone else. But there's little examples of that. There's also examples of Shane Warne has a gin company, isn't it? And they're pivoting. No,
me neither.
No. But so two news information bits. Shane Warne's gin company is pivoting to make hand sanitizer, and Shane Warne owns a gin company.
You know what?
But like,
Shane Warne,
there's a
Yeah, in the news today, it turns out that Shane Warne's hand sanitizer company. Did anyone know it used to make gin?
But yeah, there's a few different alcohol places that they make alcohol, so they're pivoting into at least providing extra parts of the hand sanitizer production. I also saw a printing press in America is now pivoted to making 2 million hand masks a day, which is pretty cool. Face masks. Hand masks.
That's a glove, Mitch.
Fucking idiot. God damn it.
Elon Musk has been talking about pivoting some of his Tesla stuff to make ventilators, although it's very much a sort of like, we'll wait till the check is cleared on that one before we start praising him for it, because sometimes he makes big promises about things and sometimes he follows through. Like, we've got the big battery in South Australia. That was a real thing.
But those kids didn't get their damn submarine. He's full of shit.
I've just read on Twitter, it's just been announced that Victoria is bringing forward the school holidays with the intention to close schools and proceeding over the next 48 hours to implement a shutdown of all non-essential activity across our state to combat the spread.
Whoa.
So
Here we fucking go. I was going to
go
to the shops after this and get some food, but I guess not.
Supermarkets are still open, but yeah, it's going to be a mess.
Oh, yeah, they're going to be open, and who gives a shit? What's that going to do?
I was going to go down and get some audio hardware.
Oh, no, wait. On the statement, it says Victorians will still be able to go to the supermarket, the bank, the pharmacy, and essential stores, like petrol stations and convenience stores. So the freight and logistics and home delivery are also considered essential and will remain open.
I like that I can still go get my cash out and rub my hands all over it and give it to a fucking $13 an hour 16-year-old at Woolies. Nom, 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 nom.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of $13 an hour 16-year-olds at Woolies, turns out that our lowest paid workers in our society are the most essential. So salute the troops.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest takeaway of the whole, like, what's coronavirus shown to be bullshit this week. It's that if Scott Morrison has to admit that the workers provide value in our society and not landlords, not mortgage holders, not white collar like bean counters, anything like that, it is literally the fucking nurses. It is the poor kids stacking shelves at Woolworths. It is all of that banal nothing work actually keeps us going. I don't know how we come back from that. I don't know that the myth of the burger flipper will come back after this.
Yeah, that's it. Things have changed. We're in the middle of a moment where everyone's had to reconsider what is real, what is a real job. Like they're realizing that, like, a lot of the time, you know what, I'll put my hand up here and say, you know what, my job could easily not exist. It would be fine. It'd be okay. Sorry to my employer for this, by the way, but
shout out to the employer if you're listening. Fire me.
But yeah, like all these jobs that these poor kids are doing, and that they're going to be hiring like another 3,000, 4,000 more to try and get more people working on the shelves. They all have the real jobs right now.
Yeah. Just permanent pay rise for all of them.
Yeah, double their pay, triple their pay, fine.
Triple their pay. You guys, you're doing the keep society running stuff, the stuff that we learned was super important. Oh, you're a delivery driver. Oh, you're a shelf stacker. You're a nurse. You're a teacher. The reason that they didn't shut down schools for so long was because they were just like, yeah, we absolutely need schools to be running constantly, even during a pandemic, because people who are working, their children need to go somewhere. So it's like, we should be paying teachers a hell of a lot more. We should be paying all these people a lot more. So they're also keeping Crown Casino open currently, but I don't know if that's going to count as an essential service or not. Australians do love to have a punt, so over the week that they were very reluctant to actually close it down, they kept it open, but they instituted a new restriction of only one person for every second pokey, which just I've never been able to get my fucking head around how much Australian governments love just mass scale gambling. Like, pokey machines aren't even a game. They are just a pure, addiction robot that sucks money out of vulnerable people and puts it in the coffers of organized crime. Every single time it comes up of like, we've got to deal something with like, gambling addiction. They're just like, why don't we just turn off the pokey machines? Because they do nothing for anybody. And everyone's like, oh, nah, you can't do that.
When the pokies were being divested from AFL clubs, as they have been in the last few years, the primary opposition was, we're taking away valuable funding from AFL clubs who need it the most. But when you look at who are the clubs that are benefiting the most from pokies, it's all the most expensive clubs. It's Essendon, it's Richmond, and all of them are super lucrative just on member sales alone, and they're getting a shit ton of money from pokies. And so it's in their best interest to keep thoroughly invested in it. And so, the same thing applies here. When you see that, yes, that's right, the poker machines are the last thing that's standing. Is social distancing on poker machines the least social thing possible?
It's just crazy. Like, the poker machines are not pulling in high rollers. They're a regressive tax for sure.
Yet again, it is the smallest of society propping up the biggest.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
That's the one thing I want to hope about all of this, is that we finally start talking about trickle up economics and how that might fucking work.
Yes.
But yeah, no, I've never understood. I mean, I do understand the whole appeal of the poker machine, but it is fucking insane that they have this weird, almost like venerated position in our society that has to be fought against, as if like they're talked about politically in certain ways and you can and can't say something about them. And then even when you start talking about how they could be bad and they might be pretty bad, everyone still falls back on the primacy of choice being the most important thing. Like, the same reason we don't ban alcohol is, there's a few bad apples that drink alcohol, but everyone enjoys it, so we shouldn't ban it. But no one who plays pokies fucking enjoys it. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
So, Mitch, I take it you're not going to write an editorial in The Guardian about how poker machines are actually working class?
No, I am, because in this day and age, we need to take every job that we can. So I will be shilling for the highest bidder pretty soon.
Nah, criticizing the pokies as a anti-working class thing, it's like saying that, it's classist to say that crack cocaine is a problem. Like, show me the working class guy that owns the pokies.
Yeah.
And I will agree that pokies are working class, but they're not.
The Whitlams are classist.
Pokies are a weapon used by the rich to extract money from the poor, and there's nothing else to them. I'm disgusted by pokies. Anyone who's a pokey apologist, get in the bin.
Oh, just a funny aside. That's right. So just a funny aside about the Whitlams. Last night, while I was getting super drunk trying to mitigate my anxiety. We were watching videos, music videos, and we were talking about the Whitlams. And my husband was like, "Oh man, I really want to go see the Sando." And we just remembered, like, we'd gone to Sydney to go see the Sandringham Hotel, and it's closed and is now being replaced by a holy moly, by a golf, a putt-putt golf place.
Sweet.
Because they couldn't keep it open because they got rid of all the pokey machines.
Yeah, that's the other thing as well, is that, like, I understand financially why Crown Casino would be exempt. Like, joking aside, it is a huge revenue puller, and it's also a hotbed of the type of corruption that actually greases the wheels of power and needs to continue. But it is one of those things where, like Woolworths being scared now about, like, the potential blowback on the economy from coronavirus. They're not worried about their food stores, the company that owns Woolworths and Coles. They're worried about what might happen to their pokey revenue, which is where they get the majority of their money from. So
nationalise them.
So they're less worried about the thing they should be worried about, because all they're worried about is essentially where the flow of capital goes, which I will keep hammering on every single episode. This is where it all comes back to. This is what we have to keep looking at. And it is morally repugnant but hopeful that even after just 1 week of this coronavirus going off all over the place, is that so many more people are realizing what's useless and bullshit and what's integral. And then they're also realizing how they're getting fucked unnecessarily.
And one thing I hope that more people call for as they're realizing all that is when the government bails out certain industries, they shouldn't be bailing them out. They should nationalize it. When they talk about the airline industry getting billions and billions of dollars, what the fuck are you giving them free money for? Buy them back. Nationalize it. Just point at something and say, hey, we're going to nationalize that now.
Nationalize all of it.
When you buy another company, you own that company. But when the public does it through tax, it's a bailout, and we're just giving a whole bunch of our money to a few people up the top. Utter fucking nonsense. It doesn't even make sense from a capitalist point of view. We fucking own you now, bitch. Pig. You little piggy. You are ours now. We are the shareholders, and you will work for us. You will dance on this fucking table for us. You hoglet. Capital thief hoglet. It's just insane. It's fucking insane. Fucking all of them.
Fuck it. Just nationalize all of it. Just, what the fuck? Like, I'm not going to give any of my... It's like the money that we're trying so desperately to, like, pay our rent and pay the bills and getting no relief, and all these motherfuckers are just getting a free ride. Like, just buy it back from all of them.
Yeah.
And there's the other part to it as well, with the idea of, like, you know, nationalize it and should be ours, blah, 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 blah. When we've had recessions and then, like, depressions, like there was a great one a little while ago, part of the reason why countries managed to get out of it, people sort of talk about, you know, oh, we got out of it because there was a world war that we all had to sort of focus on, and that's how we managed to sort of spiral our way back out again of a depression. What is never really talked about in that is because during the reason why we got out of the depression, in part, not solely, but in part, it's because when the government nationalizes essential industries, they are the ones who get the surplus value of labor. So you have a whole bunch of people providing a service, and they get a wage and they get paid from it, and then they create wealth, they create value. But instead of it going to a private individual or shareholders or whatever, it goes to the government. They are creating wealth out of that. Now, we don't really get to talk about that during the world wars because we're building fucking machines at car factories to go kill people from overseas. But right now, the weirdest thing is that everyone in the Western world, like 3 months ago, was talking about how there was just a recession around the corner, and especially in Australia with the housing bubble, we've got all these problems, we're heading towards a recession, blah, blah, blah. We have a chance to get out of it, because once coronavirus passes, we are going to have so much infrastructure that needs rebuilding and repairing. We're going to have so many people who want to work, and wouldn't you know it, we've got this climate emergency that is fucking 9 years away that we really need to redo all of our infrastructure with. It's like, holy shit. Maybe if we nationalize our energy infrastructure, we could start actually fucking profiting from it.
It sounds like you're suggesting something that might sound like a Green New Deal, maybe, Mitch?
Potentially, comrade. But if that doesn't get through, I am proposing full fucking communism at this point. Fuck it, whatever.
we are actually seeing the first steps of that from the Victorian Labor government, where they've started to make noises around what looks like a jobs guarantee, which is if you've lost your job to the effects of coronavirus, then we will employ you. And at the moment, they're just looking at things like not shelf stacking, like, you know, supply chain like stuff. But it's very easy to imagine just like broadening that scope. Like, you know, the sort of taken to its fullest extent. It's just like, hey, if you are unemployed, we, the government, will find something for you to do. And it'll be good and we'll pay you a living wage. And it just applies to anything. You know, like, oh, you're planting trees, you're building wind, you know, turbines, you know, whatever. Anything along that, just picking up garbage. Any of those things will pay you a living wage. Imagine that kind of society. It'd be amazing.
And it's yet another thing that we were told was impossible and now is, all of a sudden. Yet another thing that, like, you know, where like the wool falls from people's eyes and they realize, oh, well, you know, I've been told for so long that this seems difficult and convoluted, and all of a sudden it's being spun up as quickly as possible. It can happen for anything that they ask for.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have a nationalized service of whatever the fuck we want. Which, I mean, was my idea a little while ago. Like, in the same way, Israel has the like national service for the military that everyone has to be a part of. It's like we could have a national sort of like a laboring pool where between like 18 to 21, you're employed part-time by the government to build shit, to help with infrastructure, to just because like I work in a lot of bullshit different industries. I work at universities, I work in sales, I work in entertainment, part-time across all of it. None of it is essential in the sense of if there is a need to fill, the need should be filled first and then we can get to the wants. I would be happy to give up 1 or 2 days a week to be like just laying fucking road or building footpaths.
Yeah.
If it meant that I could get a little bit of extra, if I could get some money for doing that, or I could just get some like government stipends or whatever, but it also meant something. I was contributing.
Yeah, I think this is just like as a public health initiative. So I'm a white collar worker. And there's so many things of like, oh, it turns out that like working in a fluorescently lit office is really bad for your eyes. Sitting at a desk all day is really bad for your spine. Like people getting like RSI, like there's all kinds of like health effects coming from sitting down at a desk all day. And I reckon that if we had this like national labor pool that was just like, yeah, everybody just guaranteed you can always do, you know, a part-time thing and it sort of culturally expected to do it. Then that'd be like amazing for everybody, including people who have, you know, full-time white-collar work. Just, I think that most people, obviously we're not talking about people with, you know, like mobility issues or that sort of thing, but just like most people have the ability to get out and do some physical labor. And I think it would be really good for most people to have a couple days where their job is, instead of sitting hunched over at a desk in a fluorescently lit office, just being outside and just doing some physical work. I think that would be massively good for the health of society, like the physical health of across society.
Just purely anecdotally, like I just listed a whole bunch of my bullshit jobs. Since I was about 23, I've had a casual job as an unskilled laborer where I help like set up and tear down like festival stages and band gigs and whatnot. And it's one of my favorite jobs. Like I'm not saying obviously it's for everyone, and obviously if you can't do it, don't people will be like, yes, you can't say because not everyone can do that job. Fine, shut up. But like there is something to very like old school notions of like, oh, hard days, honest days pay for an honest day's work, whatever the fuck it is, and like, you know, hard days yakka, and it's good for you. It does feel good. Like it feels good to physically move. And it also feels good to be paid for labor that you can see.
Yeah.
Like there is just something to it. So like, yeah, we are just advocating full communism now.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So I think that kind of system can also easily sit beside a capitalist system and makes that capitalist system better. Yeah. Because if we've got a situation where it's just like, if you want a job, grab one with the state, they will always have something for you to do because fucking there's always something for somebody to do. Come on. The idea that, what if there's not enough work for everybody?
There's always a
Obviously
job
there
for
is.
someone.
There's always going to be work that the society can just use somebody to help out with. And so if we have that sort of system in place that is guaranteed, horrible work, that is a reasonable wage, that is, outside of these abusive labor conditions, that means that if you're in an abusive labor condition, you would just be like, fuck this, I'm not getting, wage thefted to do shit work. I'm just going to go and get a job with the state and, plant trees or lay road or work on infrastructure. I'm sure that even in this, working for the state guaranteed job sort of situation, you could fit all kinds of, more organizational roles or like counseling or all kinds of things in that sort of sphere that you wouldn't have to, accept bad work in the capitalist system because you could always revert to fair work in the state system. And it would just that rising tide would lift all boats. It's a cliche, but it absolutely applies there.
One of the things that's just reminded me of is that historically, before maybe the last 20 years, government jobs were seen as secure work that you could be in for life.
Yeah.
You think of public service workers who are in the system for such a long time, you get paid a really good wage that increases, you get long service leave that extends over all of the public service, so you could move from job to job and have that long service leave accumulate. These are the kinds of jobs that people have very fondly talked about that just don't exist anymore. So let's bring them back.
Yep. Have
more
guaranteed
consultants. Jobs for everyone. Have a guaranteed job for everyone where they can feel secure knowing that, they could move to another one in the public service and knowing that they still get the full benefits and the dignity that brings.
Dignity. That's the word that I was looking for.
Dignity.
Yeah.
But
dignity.
That's the thing, though. That's the scary part, is that there are going to be people ideologically opposed to this idea. There are going to be people that want to make sure that the private industry takes care of things. Government can't bloody run this sort of stuff. And they are going to be the exact same fucking people who consistently talk about how our social welfare shouldn't just be giving handouts to people not doing anything. They're going to be the same people going, oh, yeah, but you can't employ everyone. That should be the private business. That's the private sector. We have a solution. We can get everyone to work, you motherfuckers.
It's going to be that fucking guy from the IPA who was talking about how groceries jacking up the prices of essentials
Simon
is
Brady.
good.
Fuck that guy.
He's
Philip Morris now. He's ex-IPA.
Oh, he's Philip Morris now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Professional
the
evil
cigarettes
guy.
company.
Actually, they're a vape company now. They're very concerned about people's health. Anyone that tells you that, this is my hobby horse. This is my hobby horse wheelhouse to just really mash the metaphors together. This is something that I'm academically interested in, but there's that idea that he floated the price gouging and inflated prices and whatnot are actually good because they show everyone the amount of the amount things should be sold at. That's what the free market does. That's the whole point. And it doesn't show you what goods should be valued at. It shows you what people can afford to make a profit off of. The reason why prices are where they are is because they have to be high enough that they can still be profitable. So this is the idea that when people talk about how the free market's actually it's quite sublime in its genius because the prices of things level out, so everyone can pay how much they value for something, which is absolute bullshit if you look at the empty shelves of toilet paper. Because rich people would pay more for that, and people with no money can't fucking afford it. They would give everything for it. You fucking worm.
The whole idea of the free market assumes that people have basically equal buying power. Because if everyone's got equal buying power, then the cost of a thing that is determined by the demand, that cost of that thing is equal to whatever the person who's happy to pay the most for it is happy to pay for it. But if you've got one person who's a trillionaire and everybody else who has $10, the price of a thing is just equal to whatever the trillionaire is happy to pay for it, which in most cases is going to be more than anybody with the $10 is happy to pay for it. It's a stupid system.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't work at all for the people on the bottom. And the only thing I like at the moment is the last week has suddenly put a lot of people very close to the bottom, and they've suddenly realised it, and they've gone, oh shit, we need to do some stuff to fix that. Which yeah you do. Yeah.
There's this sort of joke in mathematics where It's not even really a joke, but it basically goes, assume a cow is a sphere, which is just, if you're talking about any kind of like modeling situation that's like, oh, we have cows in a field and we're trying to figure out how many cows can fit through a gate or whatever. The math on that is a lot easier if each cow is a perfect sphere. And so you can use that sort of situation to do the math and then sort of like work out the details later. But this thing of like, this is really, really common in a lot of sort of engineering-y sort of things of like, okay, we have this complicated situation. To make the math easier, we'll just assume that the cow is a sphere and work from there. And that works in a lot of places, but pretty often you run into this thing where you're just like, okay, but a cow isn't a sphere and our sort of math needs to actually account for the real world situation. And that's entirely what's happening with a lot of world economic situations across the world, where they're like, assume that a consumer is a rational purchasing agent with a roughly average amount of money that they can spend. And a lot of the math in the economic system in the world is based on that assumption. And that assumption is ridiculous. And a lot of people are just like looking at what coronavirus has done to a lot of economies and a lot of sort of like supply chains and, the way that the grocery system works. And they're just like, oh, fuck, a cow isn't a sphere at all. We got this really wrong.
Also, Australia is still on fire. So just in other news that is probably, well, this news is going to be unchanging and still relevant, as opposed to the second-by-second announcements that we're getting right now. I'm legitimately looking at the door and wondering if I can just run to the shops in my like track pants and shoeless state that I'm in. But so a study has recently come out saying that smoke from the bushfires, which was itself made up of the charred noses of koalas, has killed 400 people and sent another 4,000 to hospital. And every single time you talk about the smoke that covered 3 major cities, it's your moral imperative to talk about the fact that that fire was the ashes of dead koalas and kangaroos and joeys. You have to talk about it because people just go, oh, it was bushfire smoke. That's pretty fucked up. No. You need to think very succinctly about what that was. That was Australian wildlife.
I memory hold that shit, Mitch. I just can't.
That was the Australian wildlife that we were so concerned about, the billions dead. We were huffing them in like we didn't even give a shit. I saw people on fucking outdoor bars just taking a huge huff of fucking native wildlife because they didn't want to stop their day at the bar. I need to get out more. This lockdown's killing me.
That Australian spirit has continued through the coronavirus as well, where so many Australians we can see are so happy to go out and just huff down a big old lungful of the plague.
But
just the Bondi Beach situation where there's the photo that came out. I don't think we talked about this already.
We're not talking about, doesn't matter. We're talking about bushfires. We've talked about corona.
Fine.
But anyway, this study, I made my point. I snuck it in. I don't know if anyone noticed, but the main point of the study was that 33 people were killed directly by fires, but 400 people roughly were killed from the smoke and the fires as a sort of secondary outcome to it, which we need to keep in mind because like coronavirus will pass, we will get back to whatever the world turns to next, but climate change is still going to be a big thing. And in this country, that means that the bushfires are still going to be a big thing. And when people talk about how, these bushfires are pretty bad, but, what's going to burn next year? It's like, there's still plenty of fucking forest and bushland to burn in this country and to envelop the major cities in smoke again. So it's something to keep in mind that these weren't just fringe fires that we heard about that, were slightly mismanaged. They killed nearly 500 people.
Yeah.
And they were the fault of fossil fuel companies.
Yes. And those companies, by the way, aren't run automatically or by chance. They're run by people. So through the transitive property, Wayne Swan killed 433 people with his bare hands.
Murderer.
It's worth noting at this juncture that while this whole coronavirus thing has been happening, Daniel Andrews quietly slipped a little surprise under the desk.
Oh, yeah. In addition to his jobs guarantee, there's the gas guarantee.
He's reopened fracking.
We know where those jobs are going.
That's not quite true. So he's actually banned fracking. So part of the change is Dan Andrews enshrined the ban on fracking that was currently a ban on fracking, enshrined that ban on fracking into the Constitution. So it's now very, very difficult for fracking to begin. But as part of that same move, he lifted the ban on conventional onshore drilling, which is different to fracking, but it's still fossil fuel production and drilling gas out of the ground.
Yes, that's right.
So what's the difference?
Sorry, I think I've got my stories mixed up just because I remember reading about RuPaul being involved in fracking now, and I think that broke my brain a little bit. I was just like, wait, what?
We stand a fracking
RuPaul
queen.
has investments in a fracking company.
Yeah. Why? What are you doing?
Well, it makes money.
He's invested in a company that gives money to fracking companies. But yeah, he's involved in fracking.
Yeah. Dan Andrews, not involved in fracking, but yes, absolutely involved in conventional gas drilling. And there's this phenomenal quote this is Jacqueline Symes, who's the Victorian Labor Minister for Resources, said as part of a press conference that the gas drilling will not harm the environment, which is...
Fuck off.
So fundamentally untrue. It will. Burning fossil fuels does harm the environment. Minister for Resources, it does. And if you say that it doesn't, I don't believe that you don't know that it does. I'm saying it's a lie. I'm saying that if you say that it doesn't harm the environment and you're in a position of a minister, you're lying about it. You're just lying.
Yeah, straight up lying.
Yeah. You might say it doesn't harm the environment as much as fracking, but that's irrelevant. Nobody should be fracking. Nobody should be drilling for gas. They both are very bad for the environment. We have to leave fossil fuels in the ground or we will not stop climate change. And it is as simple as that.
Like, it's already bad enough to reinstitute onshore drilling while another crisis is happening. And so all this stuff is still going to go on in the background because capital never stops.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it. Like, they're just gonna do it and assume that everyone will forget in a week, which they will.
It's also the case that, like, this is not new behavior from Dan Andrews. This is, like, but for all that I might have praised him for this sort of jobs guarantee idea, and there's a lot of stuff that Dan Andrews has been doing over the last week that I think has been handled. Like, he's been doing more sort of public updates and stuff about the sort of, actually what's going on, which the government's been... The federal government's been pretty bad in their communications about. I think Dan Andrews has been a little better about it. But he's also somebody that even, like, immediately after the bushfire crisis, just, like, ramped up logging again. Like, that just started up logging of native forests. There's no pause put on that. We haven't discussed it on the podcast because there's crazy shit going on every fucking week and we can't talk about everything. But, like... the unsustainable logging is still going on even after huge swaths of our, like, bush burned down. They're just like, well, we'll just cut down the rest of it. And this is something that, like, the Victorian Labor government is still super, super pro cutting down native growth and exploring fossil fuels. Like, they're not environmentally friendly. They might be more environmentally friendly than the coalition government and the Liberal Party, but that's like saying that drilling for natural gas is more environmentally friendly than fracking. Like, fuck both of you.
Actions. One of the big ones, moisturize your hands. I'm going to assume that everyone has been washing their hands as much as me, and holy shit, I'm a lizard man. This is an intense dryness. It's a clean dryness. I feel like those the self-flagellators, the religious self-flagellators that have their parades once a year and they smash themselves in the back with the huge blades and the chains
Oh, sure, yeah, I go to that parade all the time.
Sorry to be the only girl on this podcast for a second,
John,
but were none of you moisturizing in the first place? Like,
no.
What the fuck, guys? Like,
what are you
get
talking
some fucking
about?
Palmer's cocoa butter. What's wrong with you? You've got 48 hours. Go get some cocoa butter.
I'm not going to wash my hands after I wash them. They're already wet. I just washed them.
That's the most bougie shit. I'm going to be a woman. No, you're going to be middle class.
Oh my god!
Moisturize your hands. I ain't got time.
Panic buying
Moisturize your hands.
moisturizer.
Look after yourselves. This is like finding out that guys don't wash their hands after they pee. Like,
that's been insane.
You don't need to.
Oh my god. We are not having this fight on the air.
It's the cleanest part of my body.
Oh my god.
But also, as far as actions go, obviously the self-isolation, because none of you could do it properly. We've had to bloody do it for you. So there's now apparently the state shutdowns. But self-isolate because not for you. That's the biggest action for me, is think about how it may affect other people that you don't know. So like my parents live interstate, and one of my good friends is immunocompromised after having 6 months of chemo. And as he tweeted, he's not going to fucking beat brain cancer to be taken out by a fucking virus. And so
Yeah.
I don't have a chance of infecting them. I'm not going to be seeing them at any time. But like my dad is a 67-year-old cleaner at a hospital. And so how many other 67-year-old cleaners might there be in hospitals in my state where he isn't? Other dads of people that I may infect their children, or a friend of their child who will get infected by this. Like that's who I care about in this. So practice self-isolation for the people that are most at risk and for the people that can't as well. Like there are nurses are going to be hit with this and they can't self-isolate. They can't get out of the way of it. And there's nothing else I can fucking do. I'm just going to call a philosopher or a professional talker. But what I can do is get the fuck out of everyone's way.
We're going to start the podcaster corps. They've militarized us now.
The other action would be not just join your union. Now is the time to join a union. The Australian Unemployed Workers Union would be a good one. So would the ASU. The ASU are one of the bigger ones dealing with the airport staff at the moment through Qantas. Australian Workers Union would be a good one. This is the time now. You can just join a union. You don't have to actually be part of the industry. You can just help give them money. Because, like I mentioned before, this is going to be an ideological battle between the people that want the privatisation of things to continue and most of us who want the public sector to start running shit and for us to get ourselves back on top of things. So joining a union will help us do that.
Yep.
And even if you can't join a union or won't join a union, talk to your co-workers. And if you feel like something's wrong, you should talk to all of them. I realise that is practically what a union does, but you should unionise locally. Talk to your co-workers. If you feel like, your boss is keeping you there, even though there's going to be within now there's going to be 48 hours to shut down your business, you should talk to your co-workers and say, hey, let's just all walk out. Let's leave right now.
Yeah.
If you feel like it's unsafe, that you have no reason to be there.
The reason why the shut down schools hashtag got going and the reason why the media had to talk about it was because enough teachers were talking publicly about it. But even then, like a lot of that was off like Twitter and that was based on like the union work and whatnot. But there is something to the fact that if you're in a business right now and you're terrified of certain things, and you're wanting to, if you feel scared or angry about something at this level, when this sort of thing is happening, talk to your co-workers because there's a very good chance that they also feel the same and just people aren't talking about it. Like I've had businesses, I've been involved in businesses where I've personally hated like a middle manager of some sort. And then after a few conversations, it's like, everyone has this problem. He's a legitimate bully in what he's doing, in how he is organising this labour. And we just talked about it, and we went over above his head, and then he had to change his practices. That's what has to happen. Yeah. So that's an instance where like we don't like one manager who's being a bit of a shit. In this instance, if you're like a school teacher, obviously this has changed now, but if you're a school teacher or you're like part of the Qantas like employee, like the bag handlers and whatnot, you walking off the job is a problem for you. Everyone walking off the job is a problem for them. That's the thing to keep in mind. The school cannot staff literally everyone at a day's notice. They can restaff one person, but if you all stick together in this, then you guys have the power.
Assume as well that your boss is not going to act in your best self-interests. Get out of the way. Like even I sometimes fall into the trap of, well, my work is like, they're looking after everyone. That's great. But also just assume at a base level that you're not going to be looked after and act accordingly. Ask your boss up front, are there going to be job losses? Are there going to be redundancies? What's happening to everyone? Make sure that everyone is safe. and, like, you know, ask these questions up front. I know it's terrifying, especially when your boss is a bully and everything like that too, but these are extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah, if you're going to pick a time to stand up for your rights at work, I reckon the best time would be when they've just announced that they've doubled the job seeker allowance and waived the requirements. So,
shout outs. Sean Bedlam has a new podcast called They're Gonna Kill Us. Good. Go listen to that. More podcasts for everyone. There's been a lot of tweets going around about how no one needs to start a podcast in this. We disagree. Everyone should start a podcast during this.
everyone.
Literally everyone.
Friends listening to this, start a podcast too. I really want to hear you. It gets really lonely now, so I just want to hear your voices. So please start a podcast.
Yeah, I can't Skype or Discord or Zoom with all of you. That's exhausting. I don't want to. But I will passively listen to you all talk about stuff.
Yeah.
Start a fucking
If you got
podcast.
feelings, get on mic. Come on.
Is there any other shout outs?
Shout out to all the shelf stackers in Australia and the world who are literally keeping society together at the moment.
There are troops.
That's my shout out.
Respect to the troops.
Respect the troops. Solidarity with the shelf stackers.
Also, something to keep in mind with the shelf stackers as well is they are bearing the brunt of so much panic for no good reason. Australia produces about 98% of its own food. It has the capacity for that. That's including the exports we currently have. And if we just enforced a slight change of diet, then we could literally be self-sustainable with our food. Now, we can't obviously do that if all of our farmers and our infrastructure goes down because we didn't let people sort of get clear of this virus in time. But we can take care of ourselves. The reason why you're seeing those shelves go bare isn't because we're running out of food. It's because those shops are just a physical space that require humans to stock them. And they require humans to drive the trucks, and they require humans to take the trolleys around. So it's just a labor issue. We could have those shelves stacked 24/7 and just have people handing the stuff from the back of trucks if the trucks could teleport around the place, but we don't. So you don't need to panic and worry about our food, but you should definitely worry about how you treat what is unfortunately our frontline staff, which are the shelf stackers in high school and the people behind the checkouts.
Don't be an asshole to them. What's wrong with you? Don't yell at them. You might not get pasta, but it'll be fine.
If you've got like a busking license to be out the front of a Woolworths, like sing about how the shelf stackers are heroes.
Just sing the Solidarity song forever.
Yeah.
Thanks again for listening to another weird episode of Not Good Enough. If you want to find us on the socials, we're at Not Good Pod, but we'd love to hear from you. So shoot us an email, notgoodpod@protonmail.com, or go to the website, notgoodpod.com, where we've got all the show notes as well.
Not Good Enough was recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people, part of the Kulin Nation, and we pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded.